Make sure you head to kongos.com/podcast to check out all the links and videos and pics from today's episode. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Front Lounge with KONGOS. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Charlene Kaye. We actually went to high school with her about 20 years ago.
No, like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, 5 or 10 years ago. And we ran track and field together. And then she went on to be a singer-songwriter, an artist in her own right. She worked with bands like San Fermin, Star Kid, Darren Criss. She's put out a number of her own EPs and albums. And recently she did a very funny parody of a Taylor Swift song, which we'll be talking about and we'll post a link to as well. And we'll get into that. So I guess we'll just jump right in with segment 1, breaking news. What have we been up to? Charlene, welcome to the Front Lounge.
Guys, I love you all so much, and thank you for having me. I mean, I'm honored to be one of your first guests on this podcast that is going to soon take over the world.
Don't be too honored yet. You know, we're trying to get up the charts here, get a lot of people listening to this.
We were top 30 on the music when I checked. This is probably weeks ago by the time this airs.
So that's at least 12 downloads.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
Just count that paper.
So what have you been up to? First of all, why are you in LA?
You know, I came out here and I just wanted to be out of the cold in New York, and I have tons of friends out here, and I felt like it was a good time to explore and see if I might even enjoy living here. And so I'm doing a lot of research, doing a lot of self-exploration. Went to the observatory today, thought about life.
The
Griffith
Observatory at Griffith Park. Ooh, deep.
The selfie observatory.
It certainly seems that way when you're there. Like,
yes,
you can't find a person not just looking at themselves with trying to get Hollywood sign in the background.
I like the fact that there's all this sort of ancient symbology, you know, and the archetypes and stuff, and all the architecture there. There's crazy astrological stuff going on. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and everyone's just selfieing, you know. Mm-hmm. With Saturn and Mars and all these.
I always try to take a picture of someone sitting right next to the orbit of Uranus.
Nice, dude.
Because they have all the orbits of the planets mapped out.
Yeah, there's also like randomly a bust of James Dean.
I've never seen that
movie film. I remember I've read this bit up there. It's the first movie where they used Griffith Observatory.
There's a big fight scene with James Dean in Rebel
but they
Without a
also
Cause.
didn't make it. Yeah, they didn't make it out to be something other than what it was. Like they'd used the property before, but they'd always pretended it was something else.
Nice.
And this was the first one that promoted it as like an observatory, and they actually made a shitload of discoveries before the LA smog.
Gotcha.
So you've been living in New York though for the last how many years? Because you're
I've been there for
originally
7
from
years.
What? Born in Hawaii,
Raised in Arizona,
and then
I went to University of Michigan. Then I caravanned out to New York with a bunch of musician friends, and we got a practice space before getting an apartment, as that works.
So would you live there for temporarily, or?
I didn't live in the practice space, but I do know a friend of a friend who lives in his drum practice space, which is fucked up. He has like a loft. He sleeps in the loft. He practices in the practice space, and then he just showers at the local Y.
So he rolls out onto his drum throne.
Yeah.
Out of bed,
Yeah. But
he's a drummer. He's not showering that often.
No. But there are no windows, and the practice space is probably as big as this couch. So I'm sure it gets really weird.
I don't think I love drums enough to do that. I'd just rather not practice.
Well, this guy was paying like $200 or $300 a month, so he loved that enough.
Living in the city.
Yep.
Sleeping bags and paradiddles.
That sounds like the name of his album. Sleeping bags and paradiddles.
So over the next hour, we'll get to know Charlene and her
body
story.
of work.
This is going to be like who's that interviewer? Famous
James Lipton inside the Actors Studio.
I was thinking more of Barbara Walters or something like that.
Terry Gross.
Yeah, any one of those. But anyone else been up to anything recently? Interesting?
I broke my computer, and it usually happens whenever I get an idea.
Danny said it to me the other day that he did something, installed or uninstalled some piece of software and broke his computer, and we all thought he was full of shit. And then I walked into his little project studio today, and it's gone. It's completely bricked.
He must have our mom's genetics, because she can step within the vicinity of anything electronic and it just starts failing.
Oh, are your parents like that? I feel like everyone's parents are like that. Always the generation before that, you feel so frustrated trying to explain things to them.
Yeah, I had to teach a relative how to scroll once. It wasn't the best, but my mom and stepdad are pretty tech savvy. They both have iPhones. It is really Apple Music. Shout out Apple. The iTunes library is kind of hard to sync to your computer sometimes. I mean, to sync to your phone sometimes.
Yeah.
So I have trouble with that too.
Yeah. It's Apple's master plan of moving people into the cloud.
Ooh.
I do feel like they make a lot of things frustrating, and it's like everything on the iPhone, you can't back it up easily. Then, or you accidentally delete like a message history or something, and you can't undo it. So now you're like, oh, did you back up to the cloud? No, too bad. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm going to start backing up to the cloud and putting my entire life in the ether.
Yes.
Yeah, I do instantly. I used to resist fingerprint, stuff or whatever, and now I just instantly accept. Share my location with every app. I don't give a shit.
We're just sheeple, all of us.
We give our dad a hard time about like technical things, but the real truth of the matter is, we have a computer graveyard he has been kind of at the forefront of computer music and that sort of thing.
We should put that clip up where he's talking about his getting the
Fairlight. on French TV. Is that what you're talking about?
No, the home video
where he's saying, I got a new computer, and you're like 4, and you say, another one? And he says, yeah, maybe this one will make us some money, though.
That's funny. That sounds like us.
Speaking of money, I've been getting really into cryptos lately. I'm trying to gather crypto fans and friends so they can advise me on how to invest life savings into cryptocurrencies.
Oh,
like Bitcoin and
that's what that is.
Ethereum, Litecoin, all those.
It just kind of shows how new a concept it is, like in terms of just general public, because it's like Charlene's young and hip and with it. But do you know what it is, or have you messed around with any cryptocurrencies?
I've heard of Bitcoin, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know. I didn't even know what Cryptos was.
Yeah, it sounds like a Snoop Dogg album. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to bring that up.
Let's not.
Hey, thank you.
I think
Thanks for keeping us up.
If you try to explain
their entire podcast dedicated to cryptocurrencies, and I don't think we could do it justice. It's very complicated, but it's like digital money. And
if anyone sends me a Bitcoin, I'll send you $1,000. I mean that literally.
That could change by the time this comes out. Yeah, it's not worth getting into. I don't think. Just if you're interested in this shit, you're not listening to this.
Are they interested in our discussion about potatoes that we had the other day?
I'm interested.
Remember, I came in and you'd been cooking potatoes like all week.
Me?
Yeah, and I asked you if you just listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, because there was a guy on there talking about how potatoes, if you heat them up and cool them down, they create this resistant starch or whatever, and it's good for you because the enzymes in your gut don't break it down and turn it into glucose. And so I asked you with this big preamble of why you've been cooking potatoes all week, and your answer was, no, I just bought this synth and I've been trying to save money.
Oh, yeah. Well, because Costco is like, pretty scary sometimes. You see the price of... It was 20 pounds of potatoes for $10. I couldn't turn it down.
Dylan and Danny are my rice dealers. When I need rice, I just come over here and take 5 pounds, and they cut me a pretty decent deal.
They're the purveyors of
Well, let's
grain.
talk about cooking potatoes, because it's kind of an art. Mick, our tour manager, we bring him up a lot on this podcast. Mick is actually Scottish, even though his name's Mick, but he loves potatoes, and he loves the different ways that if you get him drunk and ask him about potatoes, 2 hours later he'll be telling you about how certain French fries, you go to double fry, and the temperature has to be this and that, but
It's exactly the sound he makes. He makes, oh,
yeah. He's almost as obsessed with potatoes as he is with microphones and engineering and stuff. But I'll tell you how I've been making my potatoes lately.
Wow. Okay, tell us.
Okay, so you got to get the coconut oil that has been triple filtered, so there's no coconut flavor.
Oh, man.
So it's just it's a tasteless oil, but it's really, really good for cooking. You cut a potato in half. You put some coconut oil on a pan, an oven pan, and salt. You place the potatoes face down in the salt and the oil, and then you add more oil and salt on top. Cook them at hot, like 500 degrees. 20, 30 minutes later, mind is blown.
What's your favorite? Everyone, what's your favorite type of potato? Like, how would? What is your preference?
I'm just spitballing here, but I really enjoy mashed potatoes with a lot of butter.
Okay.
And maybe even some parsley and garlic.
You and Dylan would get along.
Yep. That's butter and mashed potatoes. You can't go wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we were doing on tour. The last time we were on tour, I bought this rice cooker. Ooh. And you can put a potato in there with fill a little, like an inch of water, and then you set it on a grate. About 25 minutes, you can cook basically
so
it's a boiled, not like a steamed potato, but it turns into a mashed potato, and it's so nice on the road having just simple, healthy, hearty meals. As I know, we'll get into this later. We're going to talk a lot about touring on a budget, and we will get into that. And that's
you can only eat Subway so many times before you hate yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that was I mean, we might as well talk about that a little bit. I remember there was a distinct point. I remember talking to you a few years ago where you were either just coming out of university or you just moved to New York, and I can't remember what it was, but you texted us or we had a phone call, whatever, and you're like, I'm going completely music only as my source of income. And what was the thing that just changed from pursuing it on the side and trying to make a living otherwise, and then turning into a career?
Honestly, it was teaching lessons, and because that was music related, I felt like it was still fulfilling to my creativity, and it was nice to be like in a community of people that were just learning. And before that, I was waiting tables for 2 years, and in that, I mentioned earlier that I moved to New York from Michigan with a bunch of musician friends, got this practice space, I was waiting tables, and I'm really glad that I did that because it was definitely an integral part of my growth as a musician and as a New Yorker. But when I began teaching lessons, it opened me up to such a more flexible schedule, and I was able to work when I wanted to, and then set aside time for music in a way that I wasn't really able to before. And
you also recorded a song, right? With Darren, I remember you saying that you were getting enough also from iTunes because you were still
that's right,
completely independent at the time, and you started seeing
and so
royalty checks.
I didn't realize that you wanted to. Yeah, that you wanted to talk about that as well. Yeah, so I recorded this duet with Darren Chris, and it was called Dress and Tie. And that was the first song that I did that I saw a chart on iTunes. And I remember I was sitting in this coffee shop, and I just started screaming, seeing that it was getting higher and higher. And it was a super cool moment. And that definitely gave me the confidence to continue on with what I was doing creatively and to keep pushing, even though being an independent musician is just it's just so easy to make a lot of money at first, and so you have to.
Well, I think obviously that's a rare clause that you get into when money becomes no issue for music. But I think that we had a similar experience. I can't remember what it was for us. Maybe that bowl thing we talked about, where we basically realized, we're not fucking crazy like those people on American Idol who think they're making something good, but the rest of the world just has a completely different opinion.
Yeah, it's still
you can be the most integrity-based person on earth. You still need that little bit of external validation just so you don't lose your marbles.
It's still a long place from that where you get some validation and think, okay, I'm not the crazy person, to where what Charlene's talking about is where you actually make a decision this is going to be my source of income.
I think
I was listening to, I forget who I was listening to, some comedian's podcast, and they were talking that was literally their only goal, their only initial goal. They weren't even thinking I'm going to play Madison Square Garden. They're I want to not have to work a day job and just make money from this as a goal.
What were
And-
you?
go ahead.
What were you teaching?
Guitar, right?
I was just teaching private lessons, so guitar, voice, and songwriting.
Oh, okay.
Some piano.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was songwriting as well.
Well, let's come back to this because I think we can really get into like the early days of touring and like kind of carry on with that conversation. But let's talk about just music for now. And Dylan sent us this link yesterday. I wasn't even aware of this.
I sent it.
Oh, Jesse sent it. Sorry.
This is a very important news item for me. So
Yeah, so ECM Records, which is a record company that's put out, I don't know, hundreds of our favorite records, mostly jazz and classical and experimental stuff, finally announced that they are putting their entire catalog onto streaming services. And it's been, when did Apple Music and Spotify really get going? It's been years, like 5-6 years that we've been waiting. That, it's a massive deal for people that are into this music because there's such a kind of, standout label in this kind of music.
Yeah. They were the lost holdouts, I think. I still can't find Comsat Angels on streaming.
What is that?
It's that song from Real Genius, Falling.
yeah.
But ECM was the lost. I think they were the most resistant to digital,
Well, they're kind of a niche label because even though they've had some massive albums and massive artists on it, for the most part, I imagine most of their albums and releases are like lost leaders. That they're not one of the majors putting out pop records. They're putting out pretty obscure stuff.
Yeah, but they've got a hardcore. Everybody who's into ECM, that's one of the few times other people get into like old Atlantic periods.
So we're
or
talking
whatever.
about Keith Jarrett, Arvo Part. Keith Jarrett's probably the biggest artist on there. So I mean,
Yeah, he must be by sales.
I
He has one of the biggest jazz albums of all time, The Melody at Night with You, which was just a bunch of songs, old American standards that he recorded on his piano because he had chronic fatigue syndrome for several years, and he just sat in his kind of bedroom and recorded these songs and went on to become one of the biggest selling jazz albums. And I think the number's like maybe 1 million, which is tiny relative to what the biggest selling albums of all time are.
well, now that it's available, you guys should check it out. You probably won't hear the influence in our music at all because it's not commercial music really. But Keith Jarrett Trio, my favorite drummer of all time is in the Keith Jarrett Trio. His name's Jack DeJohnette, and I wanted to be a jazz drummer, and I'd listened to him and emulated him from the age of about 16 to 20, 21. And I still love his playing, although it doesn't really come out as much in this rock band of ours. But
my favorite guitar player, Arvo Part, is also on that label.
You'll definitely hear the influence of Arvo Part that he's had on the world, even though he didn't write his music for movie scores and syncs. He does get a lot of those, but also every composer tries to imitate him now for any dramatic scene in a movie that involves strings or a choral part or something like that. They're all so influenced by Arvo Part.
I think Dylan said to me earlier, because we were listening to some Keith Jarrett Trio recording that I'd not heard before, and it was blowing our fucking mind, and we'll throw a link up to it. And it was like, this just reminded, like, oh, this is what real musicians sound like. Because you spend your life, as we do, in the kind of alternative popular music world, and you kind of start saying like, oh, I saw this band the other day at some bar or theater in LA, and like they were really good. And yeah, they were good. And then you just occasionally come back to this and just think, oh, there's a whole different like universe.
Well, what do you think of that balance that you try and strike, Charlene? Because we know you can play the shit out of a guitar. I've seen you shred on any different number of styles. But a lot of your songwriting, it's a little more on the pop vein. It's commercial, and I can always hear you trying to put your musicality into it. How do you confront that when you're making a record or writing a song? How do you try and balance your inclination to do something a little more technical or a little more?
Dude, I think about that all the time because I love really athletic guitar playing, and that's a lot of I listen to a lot of that really kind of shreddy mathy music, if that makes sense. Like I love Battles, I love St. Vincent, I love like excuse me, I love Matt Bellamy's playing in Muse. Like the really aggressive, nasty tone is something that I really like intuitively resonate with.
You know everything?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'll check them out though. And so I get a lot of release and a lot of joy from playing in that style, but I also know that in the past I've put that above the actual song. And it's been, this new chapter in my writing has been a real challenge to not touch the guitar until the actual song is written. And so I've been challenging myself to just write a song on the piano and let it be that first before I embellish it. And it's really hard for me because I also produce my stuff, and I feel like it's easy for me to use sounds as a crutch when the song itself isn't exciting me. And I think it's totally valid to have textures and ambiance be as much a part of the song as the lyrics or a melody. And not every song has to be autobiographical or like narrative based. But now I think maybe it's that I've been listening to more really great pop music that I love, but it's been more challenging than I thought to just write a song that I can play on an acoustic guitar or a piano, because I don't historically like playing solo. I really get a lot of joy from playing with people and the energy and the connection that comes from playing in a live band setting. But
it's not out of your wheelhouse, because I mean the first recordings of yours that I heard,
which no one will ever hear.
No, they're good.
Find the links on.
How many years ago was it? 10, 12 years ago?
Don't link it in the podcast.
They were kind of a little more singer-songwriter based.
Yeah.
So you can do it.
Well, you have another outlet for your shredding as well, which I think is worth bringing up. Charlene is in an all-female Guns N' Roses cover band called Guns N' Hoses, where she plays lead guitar as
Slash.
Gash.
Oh.
Slash, my alter ego is named Gash.
Yeah.
Axl Rose is Axl Hose. Duff McKagan is Muff McKagan. Izzy Stradlin is Lizzie Stradling. And Steven Adler is Stephanie Adler.
And you guys met Slash recently, right? You guys were in a rehearsal space?
Yeah. So this was crazy. It was 2013, so this was 4 years ago, and we had a gig at the Viper Room, and we just happened to, because LA is LA, we just happened to be rehearsing next door to Kings of Chaos, which is everybody in Guns N' Roses except for Axl, because Axl and Slash weren't talking at the time, and they hadn't decided to get back together and make $1 million a show on their reunion tour.
Tough decision.
And so we were rehearsing, and we just like heard through the door Slash's undeniable wah tone, and we all pressed our faces up against the door, and we were like, you guys, it's them. It's definitely them. And we asked the guy who was running the rehearsal space if he could please just let them know that there was an all-girl Guns N' Roses cover band rehearsing right next door. And the guy was just like this like twerpy 16-year-old kid like smacking his gum, and he was just like, not if I want to keep my job. And we were like, oh God, please. And so we took a piece of paper, and we wrote on the piece of paper, Guns N' Hoses rehearses here, all are welcome. And we taped it to our door. And then we just opened our door the whole way and blasted our amps as we were playing. And it was so crazy because we were playing Sweet Child of Mine, and I was like, oh God, I really hope he doesn't hear me do this solo. Because like, no matter how confident I feel about it, it's obviously not the way that he would play it. And right before the solo, the door opens even more, and they're all just standing in the doorway. And Duff is like, I know these songs. And he came in, and he was like, you girls sound like our mirror. And they were so nice. And like, everyone got like a picture with their doppelganger. So Mia
Were
and
you guys dressed up like in all your...
No. It's a shame that we weren't, because if they could have seen the full glorious picture, I'm sure it would have been such a spectacle to take pictures with them like that.
The LA rehearsal space thing is kind of funny like that. We haven't spent a lot of times in like kind of public or rentable rehearsal space, but when we were getting ready for our tour last year doing production rehearsals, we were there, and who was rehearsing next was
Dweezil
Zappa was there, and then
Kiefer
Sutherland was rehearsing with his band in between, like filming, I don't know, whatever, 24.
No
it's
way.
like you just that's such a common thing here.
You
Obviously,
do it long enough, you'll rehearse
Yeah.
next to Russell Crowe. Yeah.
There aren't too many all-girl Kiefer Sutherland cover bands, though.
Well, guys, I think you've just found.
I've got
your new
I know what the
project.
name.
cut
I know
this,
what the
but
name
Queefer
for.
Sutherland.
Yeah,
Oh, it's just so rich. There's so much material.
why don't we get back to talking about the music business a little bit?
You don't want to talk about Guns N' Roses for the next hour.
No, we're going to throw up all the links. And we don't have any, but we could threaten to throw up some of the early things just because we know people don't like hearing their early stuff, even if we think it's good. We've got a couple of records like that where we'll murder you if you try to play it publicly. Music business. We wanted to talk about like touring on the cheap. Because I know you've done a ton of that, and you've probably seen also various sides of touring.
Well,
You've toured with some bigger bands.
We how long ago was it? We opened for you on a little tour. Many
That
years.
blows my mind. I think it was 2012, so
2012.
maybe 5 years ago. That doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was definitely a different era for you guys because that was before you guys really blew up.
Well,
I think it was
what
even
like-
earlier than that. I think it was like 2011, 2010 or something.
Really?
like that, yeah.
Maybe.
it was. I'll tell you when. Well,
Let's
there
check with
was
the research department.
Several of them. We played at the Mint in LA with.
That's right.
That was 2011. For sure.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
6 years ago.
Yeah, it's not that long ago, but your band had a van, we had a van, and we kind of went around a little bit around the country. It wasn't a super long tour, but we talked about van touring on one of these other podcasts. But maybe let's talk about that. How do you budget a tour? How do you think about that? You know, say you saved up money for whatever so that you can make this happen for a few weeks. Are there key thoughts or lessons that kind of you learned doing that?
Yes. Well, I will say that it is expensive unless you know how much you're going to really be drawing in each city to balance your budget. So you need to have, I mean, it's not, I feel like in Europe, there's more of like a guarantee situation at venues that you play. But in America, you have that, but you also, when you're starting out at like the smaller clubs, you typically get a door deal. And so it doesn't really make sense to tour unless you know that you're going to be pulling a certain amount. And to be honest, I went on a small tour on my own last year, but it was the first solo tour that I'd really done since 2013. And even back in 2011 when we were playing, I was coming off of these big tours with Star Kid, who is a musical theater. I don't know if we're going to get into this, but I'll just, as a brief, overture, it's there. Star Kid is a musical theater company made up of friends of mine from Michigan who got well known because they created a 3-hour parody musical of Harry Potter, which condensed the plot of all 7 books, and it went viral. So they had this theater company that they parlayed into more and more parody musicals that did pretty well and had a sizable online following. So I opened for them and played guitar for them on several tours that they did. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I have an online following today, is because of those tours and the people that found out about my music through those tours,
Those are bus tours, right?
Yes, they were bus tours. There was like, the venues that we were playing it was a Live Nation tour. So all the venues were like 1,000 to like 3,000 capacity rooms. And so I was like riding a wave of that tour. And so I knew that there were going to be people that had come to see me in Star Kid to come on that tour. And that was when you guys joined me, right? At the Mint and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We did like a short West Coast tour. And so, like you have some, when you like talk to the venues and stuff like that, you have some idea of how much you're going to be making and whether or not you can balance your books. And it also helped that I had a very, very small band for that tour. It was just me and then 2 other people. It was Megan and Dave.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that your band is happy first and foremost. But granted, like, we were all just starting out back then. And so Megan and Dave Dave has since gone on to be a very in-demand touring drummer. Mm-hmm. And he can ask for much more than what I was paying him back then. And the three of us were like so green. Like we got one hotel room. Sometimes we would all just share a bed, and Dave would sleep at the foot of the bed and just curl up like a little dog.
Well, so I mean, Dave, you're talking about Dave Scalia.
Dave Scalia, yes.
And who's he playing with now?
He's playing with El King.
Yeah, so he's gone. We
bumped into him in Chicago.
I didn't recognize him. Yeah.
Yeah,
his hair's longer.
He's a cool guy now.
Yeah, he's super.
He's well known for his behind the kit photos, like
Yeah,
panoramas in stadiums or arenas or whatever.
Got to do it for the gram.
Okay, so you guys
Got to get those calls.
I mean, you would crash on friends' couches and or get
Absolutely.
hotel rooms, all that sort of
Yep.
thing. Like,
Yep. Yeah, we.
who did most of the driving? It was just
We
the
would
three
all
of you, or
split
did you
it.
have anyone else? It was just literally the three of you.
It was just three of us at that time.
Huh.
Of course, like as time went on, the tour in 2013, there were 8 of us, and so we all split the driving pretty equally. And with San Fermin, we all split the driving pretty equally. So you don't really end up driving that much in a band that big.
Right.
So it's sort of manageable.
Yeah.
Unless you're Johnny KONGOS here, star driver who did.
Do you like
80%.
driving?
He did. 80%.
I just hate not driving because I don't know. I just get sick sitting in the back of the van, so I
you
would
get car
just
sick.
drive all of it. I remember we
sucks.
drove once from Brooklyn. We played some showcase at CMJ at some bar in like the Lower East Side, and drove back to Phoenix in 3 days.
What?
From Brooklyn?
You guys are
Well, not from Brooklyn,
crazy.
from Manhattan. But yeah, that was fun.
We drove from Portland to L.A. You know, that's like 8 hours or something
Yeah,
like that
just-
in one go.
We would I don't know. Those days we just had a lot of Red Bull and coffee.
gives you wings.
And, yeah, it gives you something. Do you want to move on to something else?
Yeah, we talk about music business enough as it is.
Oh no, there was one actually interesting thing. Dylan had mentioned that he was reading some article an interview that you had done, saying that obviously, like in the rock and roll world, there's not a lot of Asian Americans that you typically think of as like an icon. So you want to just tell us about who you kind of looked up to and who was an inspiration to you growing up and getting into the music business?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have very many role models growing up because I didn't see anybody who looked like me on MTV, which I watched all the time, or even in movies. And I think about this constantly because, especially now that we're in a place culturally and politically where there's so much xenophobia and there's so much fear towards people who don't look like us or think or pray like us. And when, something that really started to resonate with me was when I started touring with San Fermin, and we would go to certain parts of the country where I would get a lot of comments about my ethnicity, and I never thought twice about it until I started to realize, like, you don't really see very many Asian American rock singers or singers in general. Like, I just saw that this Chinese singer Chris Wu is the first Chinese artist to reach number 1 on the Billboard charts. Huh. The first Chinese artist, which is crazy. Granted, he's not Asian American. He's Chinese, and he has this collaboration with Travis Scott, so that certainly helps too. But it was intimidating for me to commit to just making music full time and to have the conviction that this was a feasible career for me, because it's so, if you're like if you want to act or something, you like think about what roles you can play on TV or in the movies and stuff like that, and you map yourself onto other people based on what you think your skills are. And so really the only person that I had that like resembled me that was a fucking badass was Tia Carrera from Wayne's World. She was so hot.
She can really wail.
And yeah, she could wail, she could play bass, she could play guitars, and she was so unabashedly sexy, and that didn't interfere at all with like her stage presence. But she's not a real person,
Right? Yeah.
she doesn't exist in the real world. And so, I mean, I'm glad that she existed in a very visible in Wayne's world, in his world, in a very visible space. But as a result, as I was growing up, that was all I got compared to, and it was like, you ever seen the movie Wayne's World? I'm like, yes, I know exactly what you're gonna say. But we were in Boulder. Oh my God, there's so many stories. I'll tell you one, and you can hear more if you want. We were in Boulder, and we had just played this show with a full orchestra, and there was an after party at a bar next door, and the whole band was at the after party, and we were just kind of like talking to people, and I was at the bar, and this guy comes up to me, and he was like, "Oh my God, you're the singer, right? Like I just I just saw you. I was like, yep, I just sang. He's like, and he grabs both of my hands. He's like, are you Chinese? I'm like, yeah, my parents are Chinese, but I was born in America and I consider myself American. And he was just like, oh, and he grabs both my hands. He's like, I just want you to know that you bring great honor and glory to your people.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And it was like, I honestly, I was just quiet because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should be like, oh, so you've seen Mulan, or call him out on it. It didn't seem like appropriate to be rude because I just met him and he was like genuinely trying to give me a compliment.
But where was it? What? Oh, Boulder. You said
Yeah.
Boulder. Yeah. Okay.
But it was so
Could have been
jarring.
So fucking high.
I mean, it's possible, yeah. But it's so jarring, and like people frequently assume that I'm the violin player of the band. They just, and our violin player is white. Like she usually carries
Is
the
she
violin
Russian?
case.
I'm just kidding.
I think it kind of, it's not exactly related, but we were talking about it the other day. This idea that people seem to have a very hard time listening to something or judging something other than associatively, like, oh, this reminds me of this or something else. Instead of just allowing the actual music to fall on you, or whatever you're taking in, whether it's a movie or music or whatever. And I mean that association. How do you break that? I mean, I guess it's hard to break that.
Well, especially when it's visual things. I think people mostly look at music, like they don't. It's rare that people just listen.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see charts if people were only allowed to listen to something, you weren't told who it was, and you weren't allowed to watch any music videos associated with it, because it obviously would have effects on both sides of it. You'd probably have all different kinds of music show up, and then you'd see who really stood out purely just on music, not just on whatever is either popular or what people don't like about seeing someone or other. Mm-hmm. So we should just do a concert with a big blanket in front of us, and then we wouldn't be able to rely on our devilishly good looks.
How about we put a blanket in front of you?
Like, blanket in front of the accordion player and KONGOS is done.
Fortunately for all of our listeners out there, there's a blanket over all of us because you can't see us talking right now.
That's what I like about this podcast. Is I don't ever want to do video.
You can guess who's the most attractive person.
Let's talk about member berries.
Member berries. Oh yeah. So this is part of the member berries is the segment of the show that we reminisce. It's from the South Park thing where they're the little berries that go, remember when, and they just allow everyone to kind of drift into this dream of nostalgia and everything. So we're going to do a member berry. You can tell us about any memory that fond memory you have or fond memory you have of us, or any touring experience you've had. But I've got one in particular which is definitely related to that last tour we were talking about, which is when we were opening for you and we played our set. There's a song in the set called "It's a Good Life," and one of the lyrics is, "Oh, we all have had those dreams." And I remember finishing the show and having Dave Scully, the guy that we were just talking about, who's now playing for El King. We were loading up
at the time.
You were what?
Charlene's drummer at the time.
Yeah, Charlene's drummer at the time. We were loading up the van with all the gear, and Dave comes up to me and he says, "Man, you guys sounded great." And initially, right off the bat, I was like, "Okay, this guy's bullshitting me. He's doing the the normal thing that you do to openers or to headliners when you're playing gigs with them, which is like, even if you didn't watch the show, you're like, oh, you guys sounded great." I thought that's what he was doing, and so for some reason, I just wanted to kind of call him out on it. So I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, what you got any other?" Anything else to say? Basically, he said that he thought some of the songs were really had a shot. I said, "Oh yeah, like what songs do you think have a shot?" And he goes, "Fat Girl's Dreams," and I didn't know what to say because I'm staring at him and he's saying that our song "Fat Girl's Dreams" has a shot at being a big song, and I was like, now this guy's really full of shit. So I tried to get him to elaborate, and eventually he sang the song back to me, and he goes, the song where the chorus goes, "Oh, we all have fat girls' dreams."
So
and
good.
so he wasn't bullshitting. He really thought that song had a shot, but he just thought it was called "Fat Girl's Dreams."
Such commercial appeal.
So
Was he
Maybe you
envisioning
can
some sort of Queen type?
I had no
Fat
idea.
Bottom
So
Girls or
yeah,
something
so
like-
that turned into a whole thing. For the next few years, Charlene and Megan would send us videos of them doing music videos for our song, but they changed it to Fat Girl's Dreams. You guys wrote verses for it.
Oh,
You're
we wrote it. We
sometimes
made
you
it
just
all
want
about
chicken in a
food.
bucket. And
Yeah.
Maybe you can ask Megan if she'd be cool, and if you're cool, and you can totally say no about us posting that video.
Oh
Let us
yeah,
know.
totally. Go for it.
Because it's pretty fucking funny.
Now your listeners can hear the full, narrative that we wrote around the idea.
Well, having wrote that song, I'm starting to second guess my original lyrics. I think it might have had a better shot if I'd gone with Fat Girl's Dreams.
Chicken in a bucket.
Sometimes you just want chicken in a bucket.
this is
And
definitely
the
gonna-
original lyric is, sometimes you just want to say fuck it.
All right,
Yeah,
well,
I mean, I don't know how you can top that story. So
Yeah,
you
let's
really
just move on.
left me in the dust.
we're going to talk about our favorite gear of the week.
So we should do two items. One, this
Yeah.
one, and Charlene must have a favorite piece
Yeah,
of gear.
we'll talk about this piece of gear, and if there's something you have really fallen in love with lately, a pedal or whatever, anything, you can do that. So we're going to talk about the Radial SW8 8-channel auto switcher.
This is the most boring.
This is the
thing.
most boring one. It's super boring because it doesn't change the sound of anything. It doesn't do anything exciting. But what it does is on my keyboard sounds, I run them off of a computer, and like all the sounds that I play on my keyboard or come out of soft synths or samples and that. And we have two computers because you need a backup because laptops are always going down. And basically what this allows you to do is it has an auto switcher that if the first computer shits the bed, it auto switches to the first one. And
the second one.
sorry to the second one, and we've had very few occasions where we've had to do this, but in those occasions it's a true lifesaver.
Yeah, I mean it's not very exciting, it's not very sexy, but it allows you to take 8 channels of audio and double them so that in the event that, like Johnny said, the first one craps out, it has a signal that it's listening to, and if that loses that signal, then it switches to the other one, and you have our music on stage will continue, and nobody will know anything except us. It will just be,
Unless you see
complaining
me
in our heads that something went wrong, even though nobody knows about
Yeah,
it.
if you see me on the side of the stage waving my hands furiously, looking at the monitor engineer, Garen, then I'm probably telling him that it needs to be switched. If the automatic switch didn't happen, you can manually switch it. So I'm just waving, saying, switch it, switch it.
Well, that is the most practical thing we've ever talked about.
Yeah.
What's
Charlene, you got any
pick a-
favorite pieces of gear?
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I've had one favorite pedal for the last several years, and it is the Zvex Fuzz Factory pedal. Have you guys ever played
Yeah.
this? It's just so gnarly. It's like
It's
there's
a wave folder, right? It's a wave shaper.
there's just no pedal that makes a guitar sound that gross, and I love it.
I've got
play
the. It's not nearly as dirty, but the hoof.
Oh,
Hoof
I love
Fuzz?
the hoof one though.
Yeah,
So hoof one's like a little more warm, and it has like a
Welcoming.
it's like a nicer. It's like a more benign fuzz, and the
Uh-huh,
Zvex
yeah.
is more like nasty and in your face.
See, this is why it sucks to be a keyboard player, because when I talk about my
They make
gear,
keyboard effects.
it's like you go like this and it switches from A to B, and I get to use the words like gross and gnarly and honey and beef and bacon. That's all guitar
gotta
players
start
sound like.
putting your Nord through some Zvex Fuzz Factory, and then
That's
you
true.
can.
Well, if you really want to be assaulted on the ears, you need to talk to drummers and how they describe their sticks and heads and cymbals and the sizzle and
Fucking put me to sleep right away. This
Danny is not here for it.
I'm gonna go to the bedroom and record my own podcast.
Audience of one. So what's it like to be in a band with your brothers? But we'll flip it this week and ask you, because you work with your sister, who is an amazing director and filmmaker and video director and maker. So what is it like working? The reason we have this section is because that's literally all that we ever get asked in interviews. So it can be
What's it
something
like being
silly,
a
or it
band
can
with
be
your
an
brothers?
actual
Yeah.
real answer to the question. Like, what has it been like working with your sister on, I mean, I don't even know how many, like most, if not all of your music videos, or a good portion of
Yeah,
them.
I think we've done like 7 or something together at this point. out of maybe like 9 or something like that. She's definitely been involved in some way in any visual thing that I've done, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I think it's just she just feels like an extension of my brain. I mean, we are both very visual, and she has such an amazingly imaginative brain when it comes to conceptualizing what the visual component to a song might be. And she's highly emotional and intuitive and very obviously like in the loop about everything that's going on in my life. And so she has a very unique take on what kind of symbolism what might be appropriate for a music video. So I've really appreciated having her as a partner in crime about that stuff. And she directs, but we're in it together all the way from like conception to costume planning to editing and color correcting and all that stuff. Like the last one that we did was just a simple. Oh, actually, so I did 2 with her this year. One of them was a simple dance video. It was a one shot. And I recently started dancing over the past year, and it's been so cathartic, and it's been really inspiring to my music creativity to have this outlet that's nonverbal and something that's a bit more evocative of emotion instead of outright describing it with words. So I did this video where I challenged myself to do a one shot. It's just one dance the whole way through, and I practiced it for months, and we shot that. And then the second one that I did was a video for Global Citizen. There was an opportunity to create a music video that was about Asian American pride, and it was going to be a 360-degree video. And so they had partnered with this 360 company who was interested in making more content with them, and it just ended up being a really ideal collaboration for me to help bring that to life. And so we shot all over New York City. We shot in Times Square and Chinatown. We got to go to the Statue of Liberty at 6 a.m.
Oh, cool.
We incorporated some Chinese ribbon dancing with some modern like hip hop moves. And I'm really proud of how that went, but Liann was like a huge champion and facilitator of that whole process. And it was just so nice to have her be around for that.
That must be, I mean, that's something I feel like we miss out on. I guess we have visual elements, but it's so nice having someone in your family to do something that's outside of your thing. Like we know that we can call on each other for the things that we can't do. The only thing that we are missing is a lawyer.
Doctor.
Like a useful person. But I wanted to just go quickly back to how many one shots did you take to get the one shot? Like how many takes did you do before you were happy with one?
I think it might have been like 21 or something like that.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was a lot. I was really tired.
Well, you just did another video, or she helped do another video, right? The parody?
Yes. So this is the other side of what I do.
There, yeah.
So in addition to my own music, Liann and I collaborate through her company, Global Citizen, which is a wonderful nonprofit dedicated to ending extreme global poverty by the year 2030. And they are their aim is to raise awareness about progressive issues in a very lighthearted and funny and informative way, and in a way that is appropriate to the internet age of 2017. And so we create like these meme style videos that end up being that are parodies of current pop songs, but they're about social issues. And so we've done one about food waste. It was Ed Sheeran's Shape of You, but instead of I'm in love with the shape of you, it was I don't love when you waste your food. And it was my friend Josh like walking around this grocery store like twerking with bananas and stuff like that. And then the first one that we did was a parody of Hello by Adele, but it was it was encouraging people to call their Congresspeople. And so I was like, hello, it's me. I was wondering if you had some time to support refugees.
It's a really clever way to do it, I think.
Thank you. And some of them have actually gone viral. We did
this last one definitely went viral.
This last one is at 200,000 views right now, but the ones that have gone viral are at like 4 or 5 million.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And the ones that have done the best are the Waste Your Food, the Hello one, and then we did a Bruno Mars parody of instead of That's What I Like, That's What I Like. It was about women's rights. And so it was these are your rights, these are your rights.
But you know that it's gone viral when it shows up in your social media feed. Like I've seen it show up not from you posting it.
Are you serious?
From other people, yeah.
What?
Totally. I saw the Taylor Swift one, which is look where.
Whoa.
Wait, what is
Yeah,
it?
okay, so the Taylor Swift one I just did, instead of look what you made me do, it's look where some people poo. And it's about global sanitation and how there are more people in the world that have cell phones than functioning toilets.
I've saw that one and the Bruno Mars one. I didn't
that
even know
blows
you were
my
involved in
mind.
it. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so glad that it's like being so effective in reaching
in fact,
people I know.
I didn't do my research properly because I didn't realize Global Citizens was your sister's company.
Yeah.
I just thought because I've seen so many of the videos shared by people on social media, and it wasn't from you because I've seen them from multiple places. Because a lot of the times you're not in the video, right?
No, I'm never in them.
In the parodies, right? You're
I
not
write
in
them, but I'm not.
So
I'm
didn't
not
even
going
make
to
the
impersonate
connection.
Taylor Swift. Yeah. Wow, that was so cool. I didn't know. I just assumed that you knew about him because
We'll post links to all this stuff up on kongos.com/podcast where you can see all the parodies such as look where people poo.
yes.
I noticed that we just we announced that the podcast, because we record these a little bit before we put them out, and there's some comments on our socials about the way that we say podcast, and they spell it like wrong, PODCOST. That's how people are hearing it.
Podcast.
So I think we may have to change to American and just say podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah, you're listening to KONGOS' podcast, The Front Lounge.
Well, the South African accent is a very interesting one because you say a lot of words with American accents, but there's some like little tasty herrings that are
That's
like
our accent. The proper South African accent does not sound Americanized at all.
Oh,
They talk like this, or depending on where they're from.
Yeah. Like
Cape
your
Town, they
A's
say
are
how
all
it is.
long A's. It's like we dance. You know what I mean?
It's like that. What was that Bumblebee song? Dance if you want to. You can dance.
You
if
can
you want
dance if you want to. Podcast if you want to.
So let's talk about something deep. I watched this documentary last night. This is our deep thoughts section, like whatever you want.
I love
to
all
talk
these
about.
segments. There's the potato segment. There's the
They all devolve into just talking shit, but we start off with lofty ideals. Has anyone seen this documentary? I think it's just called Magnus.
No.
It's about this Swedish or Norwegian child prodigy chess player. And it's just mind-boggling. I'm only halfway into it, but we'll post a link to it and check it out. So I wanted to talk about like the idea of a child prodigy and what that implies. That like, an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old can have such a depth of knowledge in any particular field that it just truly seems to be beyond any normal explanation. I mean, like this kid he would sit blindfolded and play 10 other players chess without a board, memorizing every move that everyone's making and win against proficient chess players. I won't give it away, and I can't even because I haven't even finished it, but basically by the time he was in his early 20s, like 20, he was like in the top ranks, playing Kasparov and like the great grandmasters of all time. So I mean, I have no idea, but like just what we could talk about, like what does it imply that an 8 or a 9-year-old kid could have such a depth of knowledge? It just doesn't seem understandable, like how that occurs, or what is it? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
We're clearly not
Yeah.
prodigies here.
I guess if you had to put in perspective what a child has to learn, the normal things that a child, like, to go from not walking and not being able to do anything and having no motor skills to what the average kid can do, it's a huge amount of learning and information. Probably more so than the difference between a normal kid and some prodigy. As in, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like the amount of information that a normal kid has to learn is everybody just has to learn so much.
But there's a common, everyone does learn most of those
Right,
things. Like
because,
everyone
yeah.
does, like if you try to describe in the mechanics of walking is infinitely complex, but everyone learns how to walk.
Yeah. So I guess if you put a normal kid into this prodigy's circumstances, would you get the same results? Probably not, but
No, because he has a fairly normal upbringing and he's seems to be basically fairly normal. Like
He's a nerd in
normally
a past
adjust.
life. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
Just kidding.
Yeah, he's reincarnated from.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Jesse's got some thoughts because he's got a young daughter, 9 months old, and you've been obviously. It's interesting for all of us, I'm sure, for you most. So just watching how a being learns things.
Well, I've beaten her at chess once. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's. I'm sure there are scientists who are studying it, but it raises the question of recurrent. You know, Danny made a joke about the lost past life. I mean, how is that kind of skill and knowledge stored in the brain? You know, is it genetics?
Well, I guess it also
Is it
brings up
stored?
the question, is where is it stored? Is it, and it comes, is it local? Is it, is it literally just in your brain, or is there perhaps the idea that there's a consciousness that is non-local?
Do you need the non-local thing to explain it? I mean, I'm personally open to non-local consciousness because I don't, that just sounds appealing to me. But but even before that, like we don't even know the limits of what memory can be contained in genetics, obviously. And then that's just the proteome, which is the protein encoding of which modulates cell behavior. So there's the glycome, and there's a lipid version of that. These are all things. Apparently, the sugar, the glycome, modulates cell behavior more than the proteome. And I'd never even heard of the glycome. Or I don't even know what that means. But the point is, this shit's complicated. Like, there's a shitload of information in a single cell because you come from two cells and then you turn into this fucking thing. So I don't understand where the information comes from.
When I saw this, I wasn't expecting us to have any answers. I just thought it was really interesting, and we've all seen them.
Well, that guy who was just on Duncan Trussell, who was that guy? His whole thing is he's viewed as pseudoscientific, but I'm not in a position to even have an opinion about that. But he was talking about morphic resonance, which is this idea, the memory contained across nature,
right,
and across time, and maybe you can have some sort of inherent skill because of some evolutionary memory. I don't know.
It's clearly these kind of extreme anomalies that make us think about this and ask these questions. But if somebody has a family tradition for 10 generations of doing something, usually by the 10th generation, you're born with this propensity to, or at least a greater ability to do that. So
Is that just environmental though?
I don't think it's just environment. I mean, this is four guys and a girl. We're waiting for Charlene to weigh in. Basically saying our opinions with no real scientific knowledge, other than some YouTube research and the occasional. I read Wikipedia, I read the first synopsis part of the paragraph, and then I go and talk about it in depth with people. But
here's my question: is how do we stop these kids? Because I'm sick and tired of being
losing at chess,
disappointed in myself every time I go on YouTube and see some kid that's like 4 years old playing better piano than me.
That's what I was talking to Dylan about. When was the last time you were good at something for your age? Like, fucking hell, that ended quick, didn't it?
Do you guys watch Black Mirror?
Yeah,
so I've seen a few episodes. I've seen the one where they rate people and stuff like that. It's like Instagram for real life, or no?
I was
like Yelp.
thinking of the one where they like implant a chip in your brain where every single interaction you have is recorded. So it makes crime really interesting because you can't really lie under oath anymore because they just take your chip and replay back whatever day it was that you did that. And so honestly, I feel like with Google Glass and like there are going to be more and more like the like the Bluetooth earpieces that we already use are going to get smaller and smaller. Like maybe that dude had a little earpiece that someone
and his dad's like rook to C4.
Yeah. Right?
Well, then his dad's a fucking genius. But no, I think definitely.
Well, I do remember that. This sounds legitimate, but that guy, that illusionist on BBC, that British guy, when he played the 9 Grandmasters, and he set up a circular path that he was playing them, but he had them play each other, because he has memory techniques to remember their moves, and he fooled them. But yeah, I don't think that's what's going on here. There's obviously prodigies and obviously kind of special people, but I don't even know how to begin to know how somebody comes out that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's in all fields, because you go watch videos of Michael Jackson as a kid is a different thing, and maybe not quite to the extreme, but Stevie Wonder, like there's videos of Stevie Wonder as a kid are just fucking insane.
I think you before even getting into whether nature has a memory and at what level information is encoded and all that kind of stuff, and how long it can influence life forms and all that. Before you even get to that, you can just start with not underestimating kids. That's a common. American adults talk to kids like they're these idiots, and kids just learn everything, obviously. So,
I think it can be made a much more simple question. Even is, how does anyone become what they are in any capacity? Not necessarily even a prodigy, because that's just an anomaly of some type of intellect or intuition or whatever. But what makes a person the way they are? Because it seems like people are coming to Earth with some predispositions, whether that's genetic or recurrence or reincarnation or it's environment or whatever it is. But there seems to be a point at which you enter the world and you've already come to the world with some type of, whether it's baggage or it's propensities, and that's as a mysterious of a question as even a prodigy, how they became that.
Yeah, I mean, the way he described playing chess was, he said it was he has an intuition about a move. It was the words he was using from a very young age to describe it. He didn't go through all what seemed to be like these kind of chess factories where, kids are taught to become brilliant chess players. Because obviously you can become a brilliant chess player up to a certain level. Mm-hmm. He had a completely different approach, where what we were talking about the other day, like the synesthesia thing, where he's visualizing patterns or sensing them perhaps in a different way, or there's a different connection being made between different parts of his brain. I don't know. Anyway, watch the documentary. It's pretty fucking interesting. And
what's it called again?
That movie, Searching for Bobby Fischer.
I don't know if I've seen it or if I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
It's called Magnus.
It's called Magnus.
It's on
Netflix? On Netflix.
It's about a old kid prodigy cover band.
they play
Prodigy
Firestarter
cover band.
Firestarter.
All right, so you guys have been listening to The Front Lounge with KONGOS. Our guest is Charlene Kaye, and we're going to throw up all those links we talked about and all the links.
Have you got any shows coming up?
I don't have any solo shows coming up at the moment, and San Fermin is done touring for the year. But Guns N' Hoses is playing at the Moroccan Lounge on January 19th, and all y'all should come.
Is that here in LA? Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
All right.
We'll be there, and maybe even Slash will be there.
Oh, God. I would love that. Slash, if you're listening, you are always VIP, baby.
All right, so we'll throw up all of Charlene's links as well, her Instagram and Twitter. In fact, why don't you just throw those out there now in case someone doesn't take the time?
It's at Charlene Kaye for everything.
And that's Kaye.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys next week.
EFLWK.